starting in 5 seconds. Now, sir, honorable members will recall that the bill was introduced in the House of the People on the 2nd September 1953. It has had a long history and in one form or another it has been before the public since the end of 1949. In the statement of objects and reasons, the various stages through which the bill has passed since 1946 have been summarized, and I need not recapitulate on this occasion the circumstances in which the Government of India took the decision in early 1946 to initiate an inquiry into the reform of our company law. I would remind honorable members that between 1946 and 1948, the entire field of company law was carefully reviewed by two distinguished company lawyers who were appointed to recommend the broad line on which the present act should be revised. Their recommendations were examined in the Ministry of Commerce, and certain tentative departmental views which emerged were circulated in comprehensive memorandum to all recognized trade and industrial associations, bar associations, the high courts, and the state governments. That brought us to the end of 1949. Many representations on this memorandum were duly received from chambers of commerce, trade and industrial associations, state governments, and the general public. At the end of 1950, the Government of India appointed a committee under the chairmanship of Sri Baba to go into the entire question of the revision of the Companies Act with particular reference to its bearing on the development of trade and industry in this country. This committee examined a large number of witnesses in many parts of the country and submitted its report in March 1952. This report again was circulated to all state governments, chambers of commerce, trade associations, high courts, and many other bodies. At the same time, a special officer was appointed in the Department of Economic Affairs, Ministry of Finance, to examine the report in the light of the view received from the interested public and to submit proposals to the government for the revision of the present act. The bill now before the House is based largely on the recommendations of the Company Law Committee, modified in a few particulars. Honorable members will notice that so far as public relations go, the public has covered adequate ground. In a measure like the Company Bill, however, which covers the entire field of the operation of joint stock companies, the limits of consultation and discussion can never be exhausted, and I would like to inform honorable members that although the bill was introduced in Parliament over 7 months ago, our officers have been engaged throughout this period in further studies and informal discussions with the interests concerned, and on occasions I have also participated in such discussions. I have also given some further thought to some of the issues arising out of the bill, and I propose at the appropriate stage to bring before the Select Committee any changes in the provisions of the bill which seems to me to be worthy of the consideration in the light of this further examination. No honorable members will have noticed that the bill contains 6 clauses and 12 schedules. I think it is probably one of the longest legislative measures in recent legislative history, but its size might be regarded as misleading unless I make a few comments. The bill is both, one must remember, a consolidating and amending measure. As mentioned in the statement of the objects and reasons, this is the first opportunity which has occurred since 1923 for the consolidation of the Companies Act. Advantage has been taken of this opportunity to redraft several long and complicated sections in the present Act, which have been split up into a large number of clauses. This is the largest single factor accountable for the increase in the number of clauses in the bill. New clauses embodying substantial changes in the present law would hardly constitute more than a small fraction of the bill. I would also draw attention to the structural changes in the bill to which a reference has been made in the statement of objects and reasons. The redraft of the bill and the rearrangement of the existing chapters in Companies Act in a more logical order have, I think, resulted in a noticeable improvement in the form of the bill, and I hope will facilitate better understanding and appreciation of the scheme. I wish that the act which came into effect long ago was implemented properly. I know that the minister here is very earnest in implementing it, but unfortunately his colleagues at the state level are disappointing him. Unfortunately, no steps have been taken for trimming or toning up the administration at the state level, and at the district level they have to be taken immediately. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. I should like now to make a few observations on the budget. This budget marks a turning point in the history of our country. It is no use attempting, as some of my friends have done, either to depreciate the budget very strongly or to suggest that we are not witnessing a new revolution in our methods of fiscal training and technique. I wanted to be quite clearly point out to my friends that we are now facing the lean years of Indian finance. Hitherto, we had revenue surpluses which were a form of public saving and which were meant to be utilized for capital development. Hereafter, this form of revenue surplus would not be able. We have therefore to find out ways and means of implementing our great program of national reconstruction at minimum cost. My point is that the deficit on revenue account would be of the order of about rupees 19 to 20 crores. Here, let me point out that I do not agree with those of my friends in the finance department who have attempted to suggest that rupees 9 or 18 crores which are obtained from Pakistan should be put to the revenue side of the budget. They are to be put on the capital side, but that does not seriously alter the trend of my argument. What I am suggesting is that we would have to be prepared for a deficit of a much higher order even on the revenue side. That itself should make us realize that there are very many problems which we have to face and that we have to undertake ways and means of increasing the resources of our country so that it might be possible for us to have a greater amount of surplus or a greater amount of public saving for the purpose of financing capital development. The finance minister, in the course of his speech, Mr. Deputy Minister pointed out that the deficits during the past 2 years were of the order of rupees 83 crores. I venture humbly to disagree with him because I feel that when we are talking of deficits, we must take into account the overall deficit incurred by the central government, and that would be of the order of rupees 200 crores. During the years of relatively light expenditure, we had shortfall of about rupees 200 crores. Undoubtedly, now when we are going to have a great amount of expenditure, we might have a greater amount of deficit, and we would have to find out ways and means of trying to meet our capital expenditure. Some members have pointed out that deficit financing is good, others have pointed out that it is poison. One honorable member who preceded me pointed out that it could be taken like a tonic. Now, I am not willing to enter into the merits of deficit financing or demerits of deficit financing in an academic spirit. The time has now come when we should face realities. I do suggest that we have to indulge in deficit financing because without indulging in deficit financing, it would not be possible for us to indulge in capital expenditure on such a large scale. But when we are talking of the scope of deficit financing, I would like to place before the House and the Finance Minister the two great limitations which face us. The first limitation that faces us is that concerning the internal price level. The Honorable the Finance Minister referred to the cost of living. He said that he was going to keep a watch over the cost of living so that it may not shoot up within a short period and make a mess of the plans of capital development. But there is another limitation which has also to be borne in mind, a limitation which has not received as much notice as it should have done in all the discussions that have taken place on deficit financing. That limitation is the external limitation or the limitation which arises on account of our balance of payment position. I think this is as important, Mr. Deputy Speaker, as the internal price level, and I should like to elaborate that particular point a bit more because I feel that a time will shortly arrive when we might have either to reconsider our policy or might even have to leave the Sterling Club of which we are a member. The second serious limitation is as serious as the first. What would be the consequences of deficit financing on our balance of payments? The Finance Minister, in his budget speech, points out that so far as the balance of payment position is concerned, they have now, whether it is by accident or design, a favorable balance, and they have contributed about rupees 63 crores to the dollar pool during the past 6 months. But the moment we indulge in deficit financing, we have to be prepared for worsening of our balance of payments. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. I am thankful to you for having given me this opportunity, long last, to say a few words on the budget. Already much has been said, and I think the Finance Minister has come in for his share of congratulations as well as criticisms. So there is not very much to say, but I should like to say a few words. The increased development expenditure and the absence of any new taxation has earned for the budget a good response even from the businessman. I especially welcome the relief given to the middle classes by raising the exemptions limit of income tax in respect of personal income. No doubt this is some relief to the middle classes, but I would request the finance minister if he could to raise this exemption limit from rupees 4000 to rupees 6000, as that would give substantial relief to the middle classes. I am indeed glad that the Taxation Inquiry Commission has been appointed with Dr. John Mathai as the chairman, and I am sure that many of the vexed problems may be solved through this commission. At the same time, I would request the finance minister to put off the estate duty bill for the present, since this inquiry commission has been appointed, as they may go into this question. For I feel that it is not an opportune moment to put on more taxes on the people. Already, as Mr. Gadgil has pointed out, there are so many taxes on the people. The people are overburdened by taxes and they are just trying to recover their stability. So, in regard to estate duty, I would ask him to consider about it. My reason for asking it to be postponed is, as I have said, that the people are still facing economic distress, and then our government is not able to offer the amenities which other countries have where the estate duty exists, such as free compulsory education for children, free medical aid, homes for the poor and the destitute, old age pension, etc. So, my humble suggestion is that this point may be considered by the Taxation Inquiry Commission. I agree that there is a brighter side of the picture, and that instead of continually harping on our poverty, we should also see the bright side. We are making encouraging progress towards laying the foundation of welfare society state. With the cooperation of all and the implementation of the 5-year plan, I am sure, sir, that we should be able to lay the foundations and fulfill the dreams of India. It is indeed encouraging to know from the finance minister that there is a tendency of lowering food prices all over the world, and in that case, the prices in our country too would be lowered. Regarding defense, for obvious security reasons, I do not agree with my friends who say that the expenditure should be curtailed. It is not advisable to take any undue risks and slackens the defense arrangements. Indeed, defense is one of our valuable assets, although strange to say, there seems to be adverse opinion in some quarters. I agree with what General Caripa once said, that God and army are remembered only when there is trouble. The army consists of the most disciplined and loyal set of young men. It would not be proper to effect economy in the pay of these brave officers, as it would not be an incentive for the right type of young man to join the army, and it would be become ineffective and inefficient. I believe already officers who were drawing rupees 1400, as their pay are now getting only rupees 700 and about rupees 100 as allowance. That is, they are getting about half of what they were getting before. It is very hard for those officers on field duty to establish separate establishment for their families and for their children, and I would specially appeal to the finance minister to see that the family allowance may be restored to those officers who are on field duty. Economy in army could be affected in other ways. There is scope for more efficient operation of defense industries, which process seems slow, and by purchase policy of utilizing goods and stores indigenously manufactured. Preference should be given to country made war materials such as could be produced here and they would be cheaper than foreign made goods. I may also suggest that the armed forces who are not on field services or under any operational commitments could be utilized for giving military training to the youths in schools and colleges, which would teach discipline and loyalty. The university authorities should make military training as part of their compulsory education, just as they have adopted social, domestic, and political sciences. The National Cadet Corps is already inculcating military training in some universities such as Bombay and Kolkata. But if military training is made compulsory for our university students, it will go a long way. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. Sir, the Essential Commodities Act was passed 5 years ago, and when the minister yesterday came with an amending bill, we expected that he would give us a brief report on the working of this measure for the last few years. But unfortunately, we are kept in the dark in regard to the exact working of the Act and the nature of the difficulties the minister is facing. Sir, as far as I know, many of the provisions of this enactment have been observed more in violation by his agents at the state level. The food minister may be very earnest, may be very able, and may be very anxious to see that the various provisions of the Act are implemented in the most effective manner at the state level, but unfortunately, his agents at the state level are not equal enthusiastic or equally anxious to observe the provisions of this enactment. The most important objectives of this enactment are to control the supply and distribution of commodities and to maintain a stable price level. In regard to both these aspects, I am afraid that the government has failed to realize the objective in view. Some time past, when there was scarcity of food grains, attempts were made to make procurement from certain wholesale merchants and from rice mills. In my own state, I know of many instances of such procurement where, after making known that certain things had to be done and certain steps had to be taken by the merchant community, nothing was done later on by the government. When they found that these very orders of the government were violated, as a result of violation, there was a consequent rise in the price of food grains. In respect of other commodities like iron and steel, paper, etc., we see a lot of speculative activities, but the provision of the Act have not been brought to bear on them. Perhaps No case of prosecution was launched against those peoples who contravened the various provisions of the Act. We are interested to know in how many cases the government have taken steps to prosecute individuals who have violated the various sections of the Act. The minister said that the powers under the Act were not adequate. We sympathize with the food minister, but I want to know what action has been taken in this regard by the various state governments. In regard to the amending provision, I want to know from the minister what would be his difficulty even if minor offences are taken to courts of laws. For instance, the Motor Vehicles Act deals with various offences, both major and minor, and various minor offences under the Act are taken to courts and people are prosecuted. What is the difficulty in taking these cases of a minor nature to courts of law? There, the people will have some safety that they will get a hearing, and if the offences are really offences, then they would be prosecuted. Otherwise, they will be acquitted. Here, the minister says that there should be a security deposit. If there is a violation of a particular provision of the enactment, then the executive authority will have the power either to confiscate a part of the amount or the whole of the amount. We are clothing the executive authority with more powers. I do not grudge giving powers to the executive authority provided they are used properly and effectively and in a most fair manner. But unfortunately, there have been discriminations apart from the ineffectiveness of the various provisions. Wherever these provisions were used, there had been discriminatory use of these provisions against a few or in favor of a few. Normally, when officers are clothed with more powers, there is a large scope for corruption. I feel that it would be desirable to avoid such malpractices, and it would be desirable, I think, that even for minor offences, the parties should have a chance to defend their actions. I do not think that this problem of dealing with minor offences will become complex or complicated in any way if we take them to courts of law. I want a reply from the minister in what way he is suffering from handicap in dealing with minor offences or offences of technical nature. The honorable member made the point that even if this thing was acceptable to the House, he did not know what amount would be demanded as security. So the minister should tell us what amount is normally expected from the licensee in all cases and what the offences are which are of a technical or minor nature which he has in view. We are not told which is major offences and which are minor offences. Clarifications on these points are necessary. I wish that the act which came into effect long ago was implemented properly. I know that the minister here is very earnest in implementing it, but his colleagues at the state level and at the central level are disappointing him. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. Sir, the budget has been variously described and criticized as one that increases the burden of the common man, one which gives concessions to the rich and encourages foreign investments. I agree, sir, that it is all this and much more. But it certainly is not a highwayman's budget. To my mind, sir, the budget is sincere, conscientious, and at the same time It is a bold effort on the part of the finance minister who is charged with heavy responsibility of finding resources for the third 5-year plan. This plan, to my mind, sir, is not at all ambitious in view of our needs. It may be looked upon as a rather heavy demand, but looking to our needs, it is not very ambitious. Sir, the fact that even the consideration of the coming generation general elections could not delected the finance minister from the course which seemed to him necessary and proper should earn him the appreciation of every right thinking man. The common man's interest, as I said, is nearer to our hearts than perhaps some others can claim, or at least it is equally nearer to us, and yet there come times in a nation's history when it becomes necessary for the people to postpone the fruits of their labor and enterprise to secure the future. Here also, sir, opinions may differ. According to the Communist Party, such a time came during the last Great War when they were exhorting people, the common people, to contribute their full might to the war effort. According to us, however, sir, we are passing through such a time at the present moment, and I have no doubt that the common people appreciate this position and will willingly tighten their belts, contribute their full might, and will surely return the Congress to a power having full confidence in the future and looking to a future where their posterity will be assured of far better social and economic order. Who, sir, does not sympathize with the difficulties of the common man? As a matter of fact, most of us come from that class, and I am sure the finance minister would have linked to do away with some of the levies. None would have been happier if he could have done without these new levies, but there are, sir, certain very imperative limitations. We are passing through a critical period. Sir, it may not be necessary to continue these levies for a long time. Rather, I am inclined to think that before long it may be possible to give up some of them at least. I have very valid reasons to think so. Our public undertakings are coming to their own, and some of our important irrigation and power projects have just been completed. Some others are nearing completion, and in due course, I think in the very near future, they must be yield returns. This will go a long way to lighten the burden of the common man. We might, sir, also resort to some other ways. I suggest that we might take to public trading in some specific items of export and import. That would also certainly go a long way and help us. The private corporate sector has been steadily growing and has been developing capacity. It is sure to benefit from all these present concessions and develop greater capacity. This sector must come forward to meet new demands for taxation in the future. I agree that so far as indirect taxation is concerned, it has reached the saturation point, but the corporate sector growing as it is in strength, in vitality, and in capacity will not, I am sure, shirk its responsibility to contribute to the common fund. I wish, sir, the committee which had been appointed to go into where the additional national income had gone, had entered upon its laborers a bit earlier and had made its findings available to us. I do not want to state its funding, but I have a feeling that the committee, when it concludes its labor, will come to the conclusion that a major portion of this additional national income has gone into the pockets of a comparatively small number of men, small number of individuals, and it is they who must in future contribute their share to the country's taxation needs, because the profits they have earned are not all due to their own efforts and enterprise only. To a very large measure, they are the result of economic policies of the government and due to certain other circumstances to which they did not contribute anything. Therefore, there is a ample justification for the two taxes, the capital gains tax and the excess profit tax. I need not go in detail into all the reasons that my honorable friend has explained earlier so lucidly, but I must say that I entirely agree with them all. Having said this, I would like to say a few words about allocation which have been made to the various ministries in the budget. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. In the course of the debate yesterday on the Home Minister's demands, a number of points were raised by honorable members. In particular, I am happy that some members of this House appreciated the efforts that were being made by the state governments as also by the center so far as the various subjects under discussion were concerned, especially so far as the law and order situation was concerned. It was very good on the part of some members to have appreciated the efforts made by the state governments in this regard. There were a number of the other points also which were raised, and in respect of some of them I should like to enlighten the House so far as the real position is concerned. These points deal very briefly with Tripura, the Andamans, Delhi and Gujarat, and they have also some bearing on the question of the scheduled castes, the scheduled tribes and the services. These therefore are the various points, and I should like to place the correct picture before this House so that the House will know what government have been doing so far as all these questions are concerned. With your permission, I would deal briefly with Tripura first. When the Part C States Act was passed, in view of a number of circumstances, the geographical position of the state, the backward nature of the state, the existence of a very large number of tribal people, and a number of other circumstances, it was considered advisable so far as the administration of this state was concerned that it ought to be directly under the government of India so that they can spend more for the purpose of developing this backward area. Now the question is often raised why we are not immediately introducing popular government in this teeny state, the population of which is 500,000, That question cannot be considered singly but will be considered in the context of the report that we are receiving very shortly in the course of the next 3 or 5 months from the State Reorganization Commission. The whole question will be considered. Their recommendations will be placed before the House and only then government will take appropriate action. So far as the present regime is concerned, it will also be kindly noted that it is not an autocratic rule in the popularly accepted sense of the term. Therefore, I am appointing out the to this House certain circumstances from which the House will gather that government have been trying their best to improve the conditions there and to develop to it to the extent that is possible. I would make a very brief reference to the expenditure during the last 3 years. For the year 1950-51, government spent rupees 95 lakhs. There is a considerable scheduled tribes population as also a scheduled castes population. Mostly they have come from Bangladesh. A sum of rupees 17 lakhs has been set apart for the purpose of improving the condition of the scheduled castes as also the scheduled tribes. Then very great efforts are being made for the purpose of rehabilitating the refugees, most of whom are from the scheduled castes, and it will be found that as a matter of fact 1,90,000 people have been rehabilitated in this tiny state of Tripura. Out of them 99,000 and odd have been rehabilitated in government colonies and land loans have been given, facilities for education have been given, and in respect of medical facilities it will be found that the amount has increased by at least 5 times. Then a point was made that unemployment was rising. So far as the question of unemployment is concerned, it is a general question and has only a very short specific point so far as the state is concerned. You will find that in view of the development projects that government have undertaken, the number of persons employed or the service personnel in this tiny state has increased. These persons are actually under employment in respect of the different departments. So far as development projects are concerned, then you will also note that for the purpose of providing good buildings for offices, especially for schools and hospitals, the government have a proposal before them which is being implemented, according to which rupees 1 crore are going to be spent for the purpose of construction of various buildings. Then we are also taking care to see that crime is not increasing at all. Very vague statements were made that crime was increasing. In fact, so far as the border area is concerned, there were only 2 dacoities and no more. Even all the offenders in respect of these offences have been brought under control. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. The next question that I would like to deal with is the paragraph in the President address relating to the progress made in our economy, in our agricultural sector, in our industrial sector, in our foreign policy, etc. Sir, you were pleased to read out to us a very large list of the achievements of the Congress government during the last decade and the important targets which have been achieved during the last 10 years of our planned economy. You also mentioned the question of increase in food production, increase in the production of agricultural commodities, etc. Fortunately, sir, here we have in our midst the ex-deputy chairman of the Planning Commission, Shri V.T. Krishnamachari, who has addressed a number of meetings and seminars in New Delhi recently, drawing our attention to the weakness in our agricultural sector. If the press reports are correct, in one seminar he mentioned that even if all the targets of the third 5-year plan are achieved, still at the end of the third 5-year plan period, we may be facing a serious situation regarding the supply of agricultural commodities. He has also expressed the hope that we will be able to exceed the targets which have been fixed for the third 5-year plan. I do not know whether his expectation of exceeding the targets will be fulfilled or not, but it is quite clear that we have not been able to give sufficient attention to the development of the agricultural sector. It has also been stated that development of the agricultural sector is one of the most difficult tasks which have been found difficult both by democratic countries as well as by countries in which total planning is going on. It is all the more reason, therefore, that we should pay more attention to the agricultural sector so that it may be possible for us to meet our requirements as and when they arise, and the situation which he has foreseen at the end of the third 5-year plan may not materialize. It is no use merely talking refugees behind some of the figures which have been compiled and narrating the progress which has already been achieved. We are happy that some progress has been achieved, but we are anxious that more progress should be there, and for that purpose also certain definite steps will be taken. In this connection, I am also happy to hear what the Defense Minister said yesterday in one of his public meetings, namely that the Government of India is contemplating to create a setup in our villages wherein our panchayats will be functioning more or less on the lines of parliament. Unfortunately, he did not elaborate that point further, and the press has not thrown any more light on what that exactly means. But if it means that the panchayats will be in charge of the resources that are available in the villages, that they will be in a position to determine how best the productive efforts in the villages are to be directed and in what direction, determine what targets are to be achieved, and when the production is there and there is a surplus to be exchanged with other centers in the country, that the panchayats will have their say in the matter on what terms this surplus will be exchanged with other centers in the country, then I think a very valuable step forward in the direction of building our economy on a decentralized basis will have been taken. We have always taken the view, sir, that if the planning is to succeed in our country, and if there is not going to be any regimentation of our productive activities and forces, what is necessary is that the common man should have a voice in determining the economic policy and in formulating the economic plans of development, and should have also his say in determining on what terms a village or a group or an industry should be working for the development of economy as a whole. In other words, some amount of competition, some amount of bargaining power is to be generated in the lowest strategy of our society and in the lowest rung of our economy, so that with the help of that bargaining power, under the overall influence and policy of the planning commission, it may be possible for us to develop our economy in a manner which satisfies both the interests and the requirements of the nations as well as the aspirations of the people, when people feel that they also have their say in the formulation of policies and programs, and that such policies and programs are not something which is dictated from New Delhi, but are those which have been worked out by their own efforts and as a result of their own deliberations. To that extent, these plans are a part of their efforts in the development of their regions, of their own crafts, their own industry, and their own skills. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. Mr. Deputy Chairman, sir, I extend to this resolution my wholehearted support, though I wish he had extended its scope by incorporating within it two more services, but then I cannot deal with that subject now. You have assured me that the matter will be taken up on a subsequent occasion. I do not know when that subsequent occasion is likely to occur. Sir, I am grateful to the Home Minister for some kind words he has said about me in regard to my interest in this subject. No doubt, for long I have been urging the necessity of creating more All India services. During the last 5 years or so, ever since that recommendation on the subject was made by the State Reorganization Commission, and during the last 1 year and a half, near about that time, I have been tabling resolutions on the subject twice or thrice, but they could not come up. Of course, as they say, there are higher forces that govern the destiny of things, and so far as Parliament is concerned, it is the government and the undisputed sway of the chair that govern the density of resolutions. Obviously, it was so ordained that this resolution should come up only now, and that too as a government sponsored resolution. Even as it is, I welcome it most heartily and feel enthusiastic and even jubilant about it. Sir, I sincerely congratulate the Honorable the Home Minister for the tact, the firmness, the strength, and the determination which he has shown in overcoming all the delectation and difficulties which I am sure were there in his way. The opposition and unwillingness of the states were there initially, I know. And I also know, sir, that about a year ago, when I tabled a question on this subject, the Home Minister told us that the government would be only too glad to have more All India services, but then the handicap in their way was that the states were not agreeable to its subsequent to that, sir, about the middle of this year, I wrote to all the chief ministers requesting them to let me know their views on this subject, and I was a little unhappy to find that no chief minister replied to me saying that he was agreeable to it. One or two of them especially said that they were against it. So all these difficulties were there in the way of the Home Minister. But I find that by his tweet persuasion he has been able to win over all the chief ministers who in the conference immediately preceding the last one agreed to it in principle, and in the subsequent conference they agreed to it. It appears obviously in toto, and hence we have before us this resolution supported by the chief ministers of all the states. Sir, for that I want to congratulate most sincerely and heartily the Honorable Home Minister. Now, sir, so far as the merits of this resolution are concerned, I do not think it is necessary for me to elaborate on them, because during the last 4 years or so ever since the publication of the report of the States Reorganization Commission, many eminent men all over the country, eminent administrators and persons who had experience of administration, including the retired comptroller and auditor general, were of the opinion that more All India services should be created. Our Honorable the Prime Minister, as also our Vice President, have on more than one occasion expressed themselves definitely in favor of having more All India services. Last year, sir, about the month of October, when addressing the Indian Police Service officers when they were going out after having had their training for a year, he expressly said that if national integration was to be maintained, it was necessary to have more All India services. That being so, I think there is not much need for us to emphasize the necessity and the utility for having more All India services. Sir, in the interest of efficiency and also in the interest of integrity, it is absolutely necessary that we should have these three All India services as also some others. The major problem these days before us is that successful implementation of the development programs has to be carried through. It is not enough that we should have big schemes, it is not enough that we should allocate large sums for the implementation of those schemes, but it is necessary that we should have competent personnel to effectively implement our schemes so that in a short time we may be able to carry forward our country to economic prosperity all round. In the past, during pre-independence period, we had quite a number of all India services, but then when we framed our constitution, we dispensed with the other, retaining only two. It appears to me that necessity has now arisen for reorganization of all India services and to have more all India services. Stop.